Hey there, guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of The Finnovator. It's been a while between episodes. There's been a lot going on since I last recorded one. And I'll tell you more about it in the months to come. But I wanted to pick this up again and really start hitting up again because The Finnovator has taken a bit of a new direction with so much technology out there. So what I want to do is give you the opportunity to hear some stories from people in the technology space and give you the opportunity to sort the wheat from the chaff when it comes to choosing the right technology for your practice. So I'm going to kick it off with a session that I recorded in late 2021 with a lady called Debbie French. Debbie's got a really interesting story to tell because she was one of these people who I used to talk to about software, and the usual comments would often come up in coaching meetings or group coaching meetings, which is, I can't get my technology to work, and I'm just not enjoying my CRM, my financial planning software. And Debbie was always the one to turn around and say, we love our tool, we've made it work for us. And I think this session, which is called Mastering Practice Technology, this is going to give you the opportunity to see what it takes to actually get a handle on technology in a practice. And I think what's interesting is some of what Debbie and the team at Rowland did with their technology was quite impressive, really impressive, and beyond, I say, 95% of what practices do. But the insight I really took from this one is that often what it takes to master technology is you do have to have someone like Debbie in the practice, hands-on with the tool, who understands how to do all of the things that most of us mere mortals don't. And I think what you're going to get from this is a real understanding of what's possible, but also what's needed if you're going to go down this route of really enabling your practice with technology. And I know there were a few people on the session who came off it with the view that, there was a certain level that they should go to with their technology, but they didn't have the skills. They didn't want to have a specialist role within the practice to make it work for them. So I hope you enjoy this masterclass. I'll hand over to Debbie, and she's going to share with us how to master your practice technology. So let me give you a bit of background. Technology, I think, when I first started talking about technology in the guise of our Dare, conferences, I was one of the few people up there who was talking about, apps that work for advisors or all that sort of thing. And I think if I look at what's happened over the last sort of 5 to 7 years, the importance of getting technology right in advice businesses has just grown and grown. And at the same time it's grown, it continues to be one of those things that is challenging for a whole bunch of reasons. There are more providers than there's ever been. There are more ways to do it. There is more awareness of it. 2 years ago, I was doing a session at the FPA on technology where we put, I think, Ben Martian put together an eco map of all the technology. And I remember saying to him that we're at a point where being able to map out all the options isn't necessarily helping. In many ways, it's making it more challenging, which is why I really wanted to spend some time here today, because I've been very lucky to work with Debbie and Michael and the whole team at Rowland Financial. And what they've done over the last 12 months in terms of readying themselves for the next phase of growth, in terms of dealing with some challenges that have been thrown at them, has been extraordinary. And Debbie's been one of the really key drivers of this, both in terms of, I've seen her on most of our training sessions. She's always on the member site, just consuming this information, but also she's been able to go in there and really nail the technology. And today I wanted to jump in and do a deep dive. What are the things that she has, the skill sets, what she does, what does that as a team do that enable them to adopt technology well? And in particular, their technology is obviously, they use a lot of Xplan, and Xplan being the market leader in the industry, but also one of those tools that I think we all have a bit of a love-hate relationship at times, or some people do. I want to unpack why she feels differently and what it is about her experience as being different. So let's kick this off. What can I say about Debbie? She is, if you ever want to get something done, I say give it to someone who is busy. And I think the one thing I've learned about Debbie is the way she manages her time is super impressive for a whole bunch of reasons. She's got a really interesting background. We're going to talk about the journey she's been on, the role she's had. But I mean, yeah, she's very much one of these people that I think if you're going to really nail technology, you're going to find a lot about the skill set and the approach and the mindset she has around it. So without a further delay, Debbie, are you there?
Hi, Stu.
How are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you.
Yeah, second time today.
Second time, yeah.
Yeah. That's good, good, good. So firstly, thank you very much for doing this today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
How's your day gone so far? What have you been up to?
Yeah, good. Well, we worked through the hub strategy with you this morning, and then I had my breakfast, some peanut butter toast, and here I am.
So breakfast sounds like it's usually a late thing. Is that right?
With 2 children and a full-time job, yeah, sometimes it can be closer to lunchtime.
Yeah. I asked you, I think in the preamble, I said, are you into the fasting thing? And you're like, no, I'm not fasting. I just got 2 kids. So a lot of juggling. Hey, let's just jump straight into it, because you can see there's a bunch of questions coming out through. And I guess first thing is, for those who don't know anything about you or Rowland or how the business works, can you give us like the overview of what you do, what the business is all about, who your clients are, a bit of an idea of where things are at?
Right, so Rowland Financial, we're a practice on the Sunshine Coast. We're actually on the Esplanade in Cottontree, if anyone knows where that is. So we've got beautiful offices that overlook the water. And my boss, Michael Rowland, established this business about 8.5 years ago. And it's just slowly been growing it. And our sort of demographic of client is more that pre-retiree, retirees type of client. Yep. Do aged care as well. And we've got 3 advisors here, including myself. And then we've got another advisor who's currently our associate. She's working up to advice, and we'll start that within 6 months. And then, 3 support staff and a contract paraplanner.
So you guys have been growing pretty quickly in terms of staffing.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, it's been a really interesting 12 months in terms of, our practice. We sort of seem to have the same staff. We don't have a very high turnover at all, and we have had the same staff forever. And then the last 12 months, we just lost a really key staff member, which was really tough. And so we replaced him with, a couple of new people. And, it's been a really interesting last 12 months.
You guys are recruiting at the moment, aren't you?
We're looking for a new paraplanner, yeah.
Okay, so if anybody knows of a really top quality paraplanner in the area,
that would be amazing.
Yeah,
I always tell people when they start working, I say it's like winning the job lottery. Like, it's just a really nice place to work. It's a great team, and really lovely boss.
So I'm keen to understand about sort of where you came from, because you've been in the industry a while, but you've had quite an interesting progression of roles. Do you want to give us a bit of how you've built up the skill set you have?
Okay, so my entire family's been in this industry in some shape or form. My father actually worked for Barclays Bank. And so we did a lot of traveling as children. I was born out in Botswana, on the edge of the Kalahari Desert there. And I was supposed to be born in South Africa. My parents couldn't get across the border in time, so ended up being born in Botswana. And we stayed there until I started school. Okay. And then went to school in the UK, came back through New Zealand, finished my education in New Zealand, and then I did my undergraduate in finance and then my postgraduate in financial planning in New Zealand.
Okay.
And then moved across to Australia after I graduated. So did my Kaplan 1 to 8 when I got here, and then just started working. My first job out of uni was a paraplanner, just in a small practice here on the sunny coast. I did that for a couple of years. Sort of found that I was really drawn to more like technical client strategies, building financial calculators, like looking for software solutions, that kind of work. And that sort of led to me being offered a job with an X-Plan sort of development company. Okay. In Brisbane City.
And this was without naming names, this was a business that focused on doing what with X-Plan?
So it was an amazing company, just run by some of the smartest, most creative people in the industry. And, I was just the dummy at the back of the room, just like absorbing knowledge like a sponge. So it's an amazing company to work for. They'd created processes and wizards and templates inside of X-Plan. So they didn't own the software. They didn't work for X-Plan themselves. They just manipulated it into this amazing system that they was on selling to practices. And my job was to be the project manager in terms of overseeing the build of these processes and wizards and things inside their practice.
Okay.
And it was a really interesting opportunity, amazing company. I was probably one of their first employees, so it was brand new when I started with them. They've gone on to rebrand and doing amazing things in the industry now, but at the time, they'd created this amazing solution but it was really complicated. And, Xplan has this kind of a reputation in the industry of being really complicated as well, and sort of ended up being, I call it an IT punching bag, because I was sort of stuck between trying to get people to use the processes, and my clients could see how good it was. They knew that it was amazing, stuck between Iris's objective of the software, so, the functionality that they wanted to release, and then, of course, what my clients wanted out of the software. So it was an amazing opportunity, but I found, like, when I left a few years later and I rang my clients, I had about 20 clients or so, and I rang them all to let them know that I was leaving, I probably had about half of them offer me a job. And because they sort of recognized that to make that solution work, or to make this amazing system work in their practice, they needed somebody in their practice championing that process. So I didn't take any of those jobs. It would have been really unethical for me to do that. But it was a really interesting experience. So I left there, came back up to the Sunshine Coast and started working, just customizing my own version of, workflows and stuff for inside a practice itself. And it was so much more rewarding to create it for specifically the practice, and to be able to see the efficiencies that we were creating from that.
Okay. So can I want to dwell on that, because that particular experience of working with a third party who were implementing with practices, what did you learn about taking a product and implementing it with practices? About two things: about how to make it work from your end, and also the things that stopped practices from making it work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So Xplan is a beast of a software, and it's got a cost to it. And if you're not maximizing the functionality with inside Xplan, it's just a really expensive phone book. And the work that we've done is inside, here at Rowland, we've put so much thought and effort into everything that we do. We've built out all our processes, but along with that, we've got operations manuals, workflow maps, video training. Like, there's so much work in that to create the system that, the time constraints that practices have just make that almost, unfeasible for a lot of practices. So, that's what I sort of find that can be a real big inhibitor of people having success in terms of getting Xplan off the ground, up and running. Yeah, we've found to get the successes that we've had in terms of our team, it's been a lot of communication. So everybody on our team has to understand what's the objective of what we're trying to do, because it's a really uncomfortable conversation to have with somebody who's been doing their job a certain way for 20 years to then turn around and say, you're going to do it completely differently now. You're going to do it, in a complicated software, and you're not going to understand it, and you're going to have to fix problems, and that doesn't work. So we just found you have to talk to them. You have to include the team. You have to make sure that they feel heard when they've got frustrations with the software, and listen to them, because they're the ones that are using it every day.
So can we talk about when you started? How long have you been with Rowland now?
Over 8 years.
Okay, cool. So it's been a fair amount of time. When you came in, was the practice as technologically advanced? Where were things at when they came in?
No. So when I started, they had a very expensive phone book, and
they were on Xplan, right?
They were. Then they switched over to Coin just as I was coming into the practice, because they were frustrated with their with Xplan.
Okay.
And sort of nutted that out. It was a licensee choice as well in terms of software, and we sat with that for a couple of years, and then progressed back towards Xplan.
Okay. Yeah, that's happened with a lot of Coin users, I noticed. So when you started out, and what was actually, when you said a phone book, what was missing? What wasn't being used, and why don't you think it was being used? I mean, we can talk about workflow and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, we didn't have any of that. It wasn't being used because I don't think people understood the functionality that was available. I know that people know that they want to have a process, they just don't know how to kind of get that off the ground, and you don't know what you don't know. And I think Xplan's a really good example of that. There's so much functionality in there. Where do you start? And I think that was definitely where the practice was at when I came on board.
So let's dive into kind of as you went down the route. So you're there, you've got Xplan, but it's not being used. How did you what were the first things you started to adopt? How did you get up and running? Where did the practice get to the point where they started to realize they wanted to use it better than most businesses? I know that's 3 questions in one, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So it was basically a push from myself. So they'd had this really bad experience with Xplan and they didn't see the value in it. And I would have to sort of talk with my boss and talk with the team that had been there at the time and try and explain to them without having the software that I knew that we were going to get value out of it.
Yep.
And so when we came across and we landed there, we just sat down as a team and sort of really nutted out. And I think that's something that we do probably a bit differently, is that we put so much thought into literally everything that we do. And, we've just made a decision as a team now to maximise Xplan wherever possible. Iris are really reactive to industry changes. And so we can get them to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us in terms of, having the functionality there to deal with something like annual consent, or, on the 5th of October, they were ready to go with TMD declarations. And so having them there doing that for us takes a lot of our plate. And so we can focus on what's important in terms of our business and our efficiencies. And so we've just decided to basically automate or semi-automate literally everything in our practice.
Wow.
So there isn't a file note, there isn't an email template that our team ever have to write from scratch. There isn't a workflow that needs to be manually activated ever. And our workflows cater for like 95% of client scenarios. So, it knows when a team member needs something, it's there ready for them to use. And then for the other 5%, we just make sure that we have really good team communication, because you can have, checklists and templates and workflows, whatever you want. But without team communication, the other 5% of anomalies that can happen can really, cause problems inside your system. So, Monday meetings is a really good opportunity for us as a team to sit down together and nut out like what's working, what isn't working, like where do we need additional trainings. And then we have a really good auditing process to check for inefficiencies or user errors. So, workflows aren't that kind of set and forget. You have to always be, reviewing them for improvements.
There's 3 kind of rules, and we've spoken about this because only you and I, whenever I do something on systems, you and I end up having a massive geek off. But the first one is like the idea that Gould's law says that any process that isn't working, if you start and you ask, okay, have I built a complex process to start with? That's your problem, because complex systems don't start life. They evolve from simple. And you would have seen this from workflow threading, which is if it starts complicated, it's going to break. The second one that always comes to mind is the automation paradox, which is the more automation in the business, the more you need somebody overseeing it. That is going to know what they're doing. But the third one that I think is really important is that workflow, for example, for me has never been it's not primarily a technology problem, but it's primarily a team communication problem. Then it's a process problem, and then finally it's as a technology. So I think it's the whole thing. I don't think most of the time. I mean, I'm interested. Who does the ticking off of the tasks in your business? Does everybody do their own, or does some do it more than others?
We try and minimize the amount of tasks that our advisors get.
Right.
So it's probably more a support staff role than an advisor role. Just find that advisors, they need to be out there, with clients. And
so let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is you've got a specific skill set. What's your view on businesses that are trying to implement something like Xplan and do a really good job, and the role they need to have in the business? What's the skills? What's the focus?
In terms of having like a Xplan champion, you mean?
Yeah, like there's a secret sauce that's enabled you to get on top of it. And I'm guessing part of that reason why other businesses don't is because they don't have that secret sauce.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think the first thing that you need if you're going to start going down this path is you have to have somebody in your office who is the champion for that software, whether it be Xplan or whatever it is. And I find that generally a power planning type role is really good in that space because they've got really technical knowledge and skills, but they also understand the industry really well.
Okay.
And then, you can then delegate to that person, researching new functionality and building workflows, building templates, have them be the go-to person for your team if they are mistakes or issues with the technology.
Yeah.
So that's probably the first point of call in terms of getting software implemented in your system.
Yep.
testing communication, so making sure that before you're sending, when you create any kind of template email, template bulk emails or anything, make sure that you're testing that really well in the system. It's surprising how often what you see on the screen isn't what the client gets. So that's probably another thing to make sure that you're really doing when you're implementing new technologies. Look at the functionality with inside your workflow. I think this is the big one. So we didn't start by building a thread inside Xplan. We started by building what our process would look like and then simplifying that down to individual processes and then creating that inside Xplan. And then if you understand the technology well and the functionality really well, it's creating the smallest amount of tasks that create the biggest amount of work. And so we don't believe our workflows are there to tell us how to do something. Yeah. They're there to do something for us. And so looking at the tasks and working out, do we actually need all these tasks for in our workflow, or can we minimize it down? Some of our workflows may only have one task that our team will see, but in the background there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening that Xplan's doing on their behalf.
This is really good. There's questions coming through and I'm going to pull them out as I go. Julia, I'm just going to answer. I'm using an iPad Pro with an Apple Pencil and Notability to make the notes. Simon's is kind of really relevant. I don't know whether you worked with a coach before we worked together. Did you? Or was I the first one?
No, you were definitely the first coach. We've had like industry specialists come in. Michael likes to engage people where he can, but you were the first actual coach that we worked with.
Well, I'm honest. Have you ever had to pay for external consulting or support relating to actually building out the software systems?
Us personally and Rowland?
Yeah, Rowland as a team.
No, well, I mean, that was my job role. So I guess Michael was lucky that he didn't have to engage somebody. So
he was recruiting specifically in-house rather than give it off to someone like one of the businesses you mentioned.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, cool. So I wouldn't mind talking a bit about functionality, because one of the things I remember we talked about audio file noting. I was like, oh, you really need to do it and do this. And I was like, okay. I think we got together about 3 weeks later. I was like, what have you done? How's it going? Yeah, I've hooked up Dragon so I can dictate straight into Xplan. I mean, that's amazing. Tell us a bit about how that works.
Yeah, so we'd been tossing up the idea of doing the audio file noting on and off over the years. And then I think when we first started, I think that's probably one of the first things you said to us is, are you, dictating your file notes? And we weren't. So, you motivated us to go out and we started looking at different software. We did end up choosing the Dragon Professional software because we could use it speak directly into to Xplan to record our file notes. But it's also got really cool functionality in that you can create templates with it as well. So if there's like certain phrases or strategies wording that you use a lot in your documents, that you can come up with a phrase that Dragon will recognize and then dump those templates and things into the file notes. So we found the efficiencies that created were almost immediate. So we went from having an average time for an advisor to complete a file note went from being an hour down to 15 minutes. And that was straight off the bat.
Wow.
Yeah, I was really impressed.
Yeah, that's really good. Can you give us some other examples? I mean, it's a really great question from Simon. Tyson? You mentioned automation. You mentioned there's things that are happening in the background. Can you give us an example of a task where Xplan's just doing the heavy lifting?
You could have Xplan. So we would have Xplan set up. Let's take an offer review, right? So we don't automate a lot of our client email communications because that can create a world of pain.
Yes,
we semi-automate them, but we just don't have them going out without our team knowing, except we do this with the let us know list, which we worked with you, Stu, and the offer of review. And so Xplan in the background, when we start a review process with our clients, so we start a couple of months ahead just so we can be ticking off a few boxes before we meet with a client. Xplan will be sending out the offer of review. We'll be sending them out a link to book into Calendly, so to book in online to our advisor's diary. They'll be activating the workflow for our team to book the actual appointment if we don't hear from the client, sending out the FSG. You can have Xplan then updating like all your FSG dates and version numbers and things like that. So that's been useful, other automation. So we use the pipeline functionality in Xplan, which is sort of a way of keeping track of where you can see all the advice that you've got on the go at any one time. And you can have the tasks updating that through the progression of, the advice process in the background as well. There's lots. It's sort of, there's a lot you can do.
What else are you most proud of? Is there any other piece of functionality that you just look at and go, that's just been an absolute boon in terms of time, or you're just proud of having done?
Yeah, it's not Xplan related, but so we decided to move all our implementation outside of Xplan. And the reason for that is because when you're using like a task kind of thread process for managing implementation, it can end up getting really task heavy and quite messy. And so we tried to do this inside Xplan. So I really wanted like a project management style kind of board for managing our implementation. And I tried to do this probably for a couple of months with Inside Xplan in terms of I'm using the functionality that we had available to us on our site and just couldn't get it to work. So we ended up going to Trello to build up our implementation process. So I don't know if people know what Trello is. I'm sure a lot of people do, but it's like a board style, web page, and we have a board per advisor. And then the board's broken down into columns. So we have like waiting for client, waiting for provider, and another column will be like to check, and then it's basically completed. And so when we start implementation for a client, we'll have like a card that we create for that client. And then to that card, we add checklists for all the strategies that we've identified in the advice document. And our implementation team will work through that checklist, making sure they complete everything to do with the implementation of that advice. They can record comments, which are date and time stamped. And so what that gives us is then like an overview of what's happening for every advisor in terms of implementation. And it also means that if I happen to take a phone call from a client who wanted to know something about what was happening with their advice, I can actually pick that up straight away and look and tell them exactly where we're at. And that just not only removed a lot of inefficiency from inside Xplan in terms of managing implementation, but just really improved not only efficiency, but, removing errors and mistakes and things like that as well.
Martin's asked a question I'm going to pull out. And again, if this is something you can answer, great. If not, that's totally cool. Obviously, a lot of discussions going on right now about integrating the fact-finding process, either by getting clients to fill it out, and there's a lot of tools out there. What have you found the most efficient way to get the data out of the client's head and into Xplan? Whether upfront or review. This is a tricky one. We've tried My Prosperity. It's a great system, but it didn't work for us. You can use a client sort of portal for it. What we've actually found though, Martin, and this isn't going to help you at all, but we have a sort of older demographic of clients, and we were talking about this morning, Stu, is that they don't necessarily want to do their own inputting or fact-finding, and they don't want to log into portals, and they don't want that. They just want to see their advisor and they want to have that relationship. So we found that we haven't had success in terms of using an online fact-find and having our clients input that data themselves. So sorry, it doesn't answer that question, but yeah. It's weird because we were talking at our session this morning about portals, and kind of my view on technology is only half the solution. It's client motivation. At the end of the day, if you've got a client base that don't want to do it, Martin, and this is not just you, honestly, sometimes the most efficient way to fill in the fact find is book an hour Zoom meeting, sit down with the client, and actually get someone to input the data there and then, because that's an hour of their time, an hour of your time. But I get why people would want to have those interfaces. But as soon as you've got that, you've still got to solve the problem of, does this person want to input the information? And I don't think we're ever going to get to 100%. I don't think we'll get anywhere near 80% where every client's going to do it. That's just kind of where I'm coming from on it. Yeah, definitely.
So we probably have a handful that will jump in and update information, not put in brand new information, but the majority of our clients, we do exactly what you said, Steve. We just jump on a Zoom call and just input it ourselves.
Actually, that's a good point. Audio notes that go in, are they transcribed or is it just the audio?
Into Xplan, so it's a voice to text system. So the advisors speak it, and then Xplan recognizes that and just puts the text in. But you can create like a lot of formatting and things like that with the voice recognition as well. So it's not just bare bones, just text. It's pretty cool. It's worth a visit.
It is. I'm like, the only reason I don't use, I've never used Dragon because it's not an Apple thing. They don't have it. And I mean, someone said, what's the difference between Otter and Dragon? Not a lot, really. It's purely the fact that I don't use it because, because Dragon's not a map. Yeah. You can literally use either.
Otter's online though, isn't it? It's like a web-based thing.
Otter is a web-based thing, yeah. Is Dragon not?
No, it's not. Yeah, so there's a little bit of cost in terms of the initial outlay. So it's probably a little bit old school like that, but it worked for us. It's
definitely an older one, and you have to. I think as you train, it gets better. So it's not. It's
definitely.
Let's have a question. Here we go. This is actually really specific. Of course, it is, Tyson. You're very, very specific about this. I found the biggest inefficiency of Xplan is how many clicks you need to make to get a field, and then waiting for that field to load. Any tricks around that?
So can you give me an example? So is it just that you want to go in and update the FSG, or are you talking about from a workflow?
I guess he's talking about when he updates, like, for example, client information, and you edit, and then you have to, are you getting that, or is that might be
a specific? Sort of. So I'll take it from two angles. So one, there is that Xplan Touch, which is sort of like, oh, right. Okay. So Xplan Touch is where you can have, it's more of a user kind of friendly. It's the same site, same field, same everything, but you just log in and it's more user friendly, less clicks. So if you're doing a fact find, you might find that a little bit easier, Tyson. I guess the other thing is, getting your workflows to update fields for you, if that's at all possible, or just getting your workflows to direct you to fields to update them. Might save a few clicks, but yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about the team usage of it? Because obviously you can set up the best system, but getting the team up and using it, and specifically training people. I know you guys have worked with outsourced staff as well.
Yes. Yeah, we've been outsourced power planner.
What are some tips and tricks you can give to people for actually getting, the team invested and team using it, and make it sort of more of what you all use rather than just something that is, in your words, a giant phone book?
Yeah, okay. So the goal of our workflows is just no death by tasks, and to make it as simple as possible. And it takes a lot of thought process to get it as simple as possible, to remove as much as you possibly can. It's like when you're creating a checklist, we just got to remove it down to the very bare, basic, most important key issues. You can't have a checklist that's 20 items long. So for us, it's making it as simple and easy as to use for our team as possible, and obviously like engaging them as much as possible along the way. So getting their feedback and, in our Monday meetings, let us know what's going on. What do you need more information with? Quite often we can be thinking that we've explained something to our team and they understand it, but they might have heard it completely differently. So another tip for that would be, when we're running our trainings, we actually don't run it. We get our team to run it. So a good example was yesterday we went through some annual consent, trying to improve some efficiencies in that process, and we had the lady who does our annual consent run the training session for everybody. And that just gave us really good peace of mind that she knows what she's doing, but also helped us as a team to kind of collaborate and say, well, actually, we don't need to do this, or this bit's too long, or, that's making us inefficient.
Yeah. If I went around to the team, how do you feel about software in your business? What would be the general feedback? When you'd go, I'm on top of it, what would everyone else say?
I don't know what Michael would say. I think he appreciates the amount of work that we do in terms of the software, but most of our team are really, really engaged with it. I think most of them would be pretty positive about software. Like that's the other thing that we do as well, is that we only use two systems, right? So we use Xplan as much as possible. If we can't get it to work inside Xplan, and there's definitely things that we don't like about Xplan that we find we can do better outside. Yep. If we're not using Xplan, then we use Microsoft Teams. And the reason for that is that you can have multiple different apps that you can add to Teams. So our team only ever have to log into two systems. So it's either Xplan or Microsoft Teams. And then inside Teams, we've got Adobe Sign, there's online calendars, client surveys, our ops manuals in there. We've got chat functionality for when we're working from home, and Trello boards are in there. So just making sure that our team only ever have to kind of log in to the minimum amount of software as possible.
Worth talking a little bit about integration. Like, you've only got two. Are there any, firstly, are there any tech dead ends you went down and you just kind of circle back? And was integration ever an issue along the way?
Well, integration with Explain is probably always going to be an issue. Not really dead ends, I suppose. Some of my more harebrained schemes get knocked down pretty quick before they get off the ground. But we tried My Prosperity, which it's an amazing system, amazing program. It didn't work for us. So that was but it was more about learning what our clients wanted rather than it being a dead end. So it was useful for us to go down that road.
Okay.
That's probably the only example I've really got for you. Okay, in terms of technology we've turned off, yeah.
So outside of that, like, if you were, let's say you got a practice who's frustrated with whether it's Xplan or whether it's some other tool, and they're just frustrated, they can't get it to work, and they sort of say to you, can you just give me three things that I should start with to get this under control? Now, what are the 3 tips you'd give them, which would kind of start them down the path to learning to love the bomb? That's a movie reference, but
okay. Well, I probably, I've said this, and I don't mean to keep repeating myself, but having a champion for that software, you can't do it without the champion.
Yep.
You need that person to be researching it, learning about it, learning the functionality, because they're going to train your team. You need them to be building or coding the templates if they can handle, if they're coders or whatever.
Yep.
And being that go-to person in your site, you can't do it without that. Like, advisors aren't software developers, they're not coders. So, they need to be doing what they do best, and you need to be able to outsource that problem to somebody in your practice to do that for you.
Your recommendation is find a paraplanner or technically minded person who's comfortable to do it, get them to build the workflow, get them to really own it, do the training, understand how it works, know the functionality, and then build the processes, get that person to build the processes outside. Is that?
Yeah, yep. So we built our processes definitely outside Xplan. That was sort of the last stage, was then going to the technology. So it's really important to understand exactly what your practice needs to happen. You can't build the process for the technology. It has to be the other way around. And so we just sat down, mapped it out. So I'll give you an example of when we did our review process. We basically just got Post-it notes, and we just wrote every single thing that needed to happen in terms of our review process from start to finish. Everything went on individual Post-it notes, and we had 30 Post-it notes sitting. And then what we started to do was then say, which tasks can happen at the same time. And then we started to make little piles of things that could happen. We have a big A3 sheet of cardboard, and we kind of broke that down into rows. So we had like an advisor row and an associate row, paraplanner row, and then a client service manager row. And we started to get those little piles of Post-it notes, and we start putting them in like a chronological order in terms of when they will happen inside the process. And that just naturally creates your workflow map. And then from there, then you take it to the software that you're using and see how you can maximize the functionality within inside your software to make that process even simpler.
It's a really good point. It's worth reiterating, because I've seen, actually in the last year, I've seen a couple of bit practices get themselves in trouble where they're trying to take a process and put it straight into the workflow. And essentially what you're doing there is you're trying to solve 2 problems. You're trying to work out what your process is and how to translate it into, the system. Not to mention, you've got the problem, you're never going to be able to get it out easily because they're not designed to do that way. So it's really interesting to see you as a team sit down, and it's very tactile, and you work through it in that way, and it seems to have worked quite well.
Yeah, it definitely works. So it can end up being an overwhelming thing when you've got 30 Post-it notes, but if you can sort of then start, consolidating them into individual processes, and then break that huge, review component down into individual kind of workflows, which we kind of based on the objective of the workflow. So our first workflow would be, making sure we book someone in for a review. And then our next workflow would be managing that and that appointment process, and our third would be generating the advice document. And even though they all kind of work together seamlessly like one workflow, we've actually got lots of individual little workflows underneath to make them as simple and as easy to use as possible.
Perfect. I'm going to do a bit of a stock take of where we're at, and I'm keen to talk to you about where you guys are at now. I want to know a little bit, Debbie, about whether there's any particular software that you're looking at and you're excited about. But let's just do a bit of it. And by the way, I'd love to know from you out there, what's been most useful that we've spoken about? Just put it in the chat box so I can give Debbie a bit of feedback. And also, if there's anything you want to know, sort of know further. Tyson mentioned at the beginning, he said he's still spending way too much time on post-meeting activities, diary notes, post-meeting data validation, post-meeting email summaries. Got any suggestions? I mean, I don't know whether Michael's the same and you've had to sort of get some habits, or whether he's naturally very good at it. What would you say to someone who's just finding their ability to get out of their own way after a meeting? What is there anything you can offer?
Well, we have our diary structured really well so that we only have a certain sort of blocks available for booking in client appointments. That time includes making sure that any after appointment prep is done at that time. And then, like I said, we template everything. So if our advisor needs a file note, they're not writing that from scratch. They're going to sit down and they know, the most important information they need to record. They're using Dragon to record that. So it's, 15 minutes of their time. That's probably the only task our advisors get, I think, is to file note inside Xplan. So we really don't want them in the system at all, really. That's probably more support staff role. So
to summarize, to solve that problem, nail the audio file noting and make sure that you're not the one doing the Xplan, give it to someone else to do, which is, it's good.
Yeah.
One question which came up was interesting. You may not, I know you guys you've been pretty, it seems like you've gone down the route of going, we only want a few sort of tools. Is that actively you've made a decision you don't want a lot of tools? And if so, what's your view of those who go down the route of trying to combine, I want the best of this and the best of this?
So it's actively decided that we don't want to do a lot of tools because we'll just get a lot of pushback from our team. We're then saying, you need to jump in and out of this product or that software. They're going to get pretty peeved off with us if we keep adding all these like crazy weird ideas to their one simple process. So it's got to be as simple as possible. Some of our team aren't tech savvy. And how do you kind of then deal with some people that really are technical and tech based, and the other end of the spectrum that aren't, and they're both doing the same job? So you have to have something that works for the whole range of technical abilities. And then we just find that Teams, I don't know if people have used it, it's so easy. You've got the video record, like team meeting, video meetings in there. It's so simple, Microsoft based, it's easy. So we've just got to, just keep things as simple as possible.
But I'd probably add to that and say, Chloe, this is not answer your question. It comes down to that automation. Well, the more complexity you add in your system, the more you need someone to keep on top of it. I always think, I know I'm a bit of a history buff, but I always think about the First World War was caused by Bismarck. Like the death of Bismarck, he knew all of the treaties between all the countries, and he knew what would trigger. And as soon as he was gone, there was just a mess. No one really understood it. So my view, I think you've got two strategies. You can choose. If I don't want that complexity, I'm going to use one tool. In which case, you're going to need a champion, and it doesn't matter how clunky it is. It doesn't matter how hard it is. You're going to invest in it, and that's the tool. But if you're going to go down the other route of best of breed, then I think still you've got to ask your questions. Okay, am I using teamwork projects and Trello? Could I use the same thing? I've got ActiveCampaign and MailChimp. Do I really need them? And always seem to cull as well as, like, for example, if you've got a separate workflow system, you don't need client data in there. Literally all you need in your workflow system is the name of the client, and that's it. So be very, very careful about where your data goes, I think is probably a big one. It's a position that in order for a firm to be successful, do they need to have a technical expert, or is there software over there who doesn't require the user to have a master's IT? Yeah, what's your view? I mean, is this just the way it is, or are there ways of doing it without necessarily having to be, Steve Wozniak?
I think that there is a big gap in the financial planning services software market. We've stuck with Xplan, it's what we know. but it is really complicated. And yeah, unfortunately, you do kind of need to have someone who is the expert if you're going to start maximizing the functionality within that. But we like it because, we can attach everything to a client file. Everything that happens in this, a great audit trail. We record our time against a client file inside Explain. So that's been really useful, like bringing on new staff, working out the capacity that we need, that they can take on in terms of client work. It's been really useful with our pricing system. So that's why we use it. In terms of a simple one, I think there's definitely simpler CRMs. There's definitely simpler workflow kind of structures, but something that does it all together, yeah, there's definitely a gap in the market.
I think maybe the answer is the fact that if you want to do things in complex ways, the tools you need to have are going to be complex. If you're willing to get rid of the complexity and do simple things, then it's going to be simple. It's the classic thing. I often say when people buy an X-Plan, this is not a in terms of car terms, this is not a runabout. It's not an automatic gearbox. It's a truck with 6 gearboxes that you need a license to run. And if there's plenty of tools out there. I'm not going to mention them because they're there, which will do simple things. But the problem is if you're the kind of person who's going to go, oh, that doesn't do it, I want to customize it, and it's not, then that's not going to satisfy you. But similarly, if you're the person who just wants to get on with it and doesn't want to have to, doesn't care about the font or whatever it looks like, then maybe Explain's not the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good point. You don't need to have things complex if you don't need to have things complex. So, it's the nature of what we do that we did need to go to a system like Explain to do what we wanted it to do. But maybe your practice doesn't need that. Maybe you could just go to a Trello. I mean, our Trello board, we just use the free service, the free offering that they've got. It's really simple and easy to use. It's really user friendly. So, maybe it's just that's all you needed, a simple CRM and, some Excel spreadsheets. I don't know. So
there are some great tools coming out now, and increasingly the tools like, Plutosoft is one. Advice Intelligence looks really interesting. There's, what's that one? Massive from the States. There's Midwinter. So there's plenty of options out there. But I think as well, you got to know what you're looking for. If you're going to walk into a room and you've got 10 providers are going to show you their wares, if you don't know, I need this, 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 and this, everything's going to look like an amazing tool. But if you know, I don't want that, okay, you're out. I'm not even going to talk to you, then it's kind of different. I'm really keen to know, Debbie, where do you think it's heading from a technology point of view for you guys? Because you've now got a fully systemized back office. You're now starting to add people in, and you've got this methodology of doing things. Like you're doing this because you're headed for a specific direction as a business, right?
We're just trying to get all the kind of groundwork ready so that we can start growing, because we're definitely, we're a well-established business, got a, really good sort of cash flow, really good number of clients, but we're at that point now where we, it's sort of a decision tree, I guess, of whether we get bigger or not. And so we're sort of putting in that groundwork now of, making sure we've got systems in place so that we can bring in, if we bought a book of clients or, brought in more advisors, that that would be easy for us to be able to dump a book into our system and for it to work and to be able to take off running. So it's just getting the groundwork there.
For you personally, what would you like to see the next 10 years hold for you in the industry?
Some overseas travel, I think.
Where are you planning on going first?
If they still do those round the world tickets, I'd probably do that. I actually had a trip booked to Canada for my 40th birthday, which got canned for COVID. So I would love to rebook that. My brother lives in Germany with his wife and my niece, and I'd love to just hop on a plane and give them a big hug too.
Whereabouts in Germany?
It's like a little country town near Herford.
Whereabouts?
Trying to think of the big towns that it's near. We would probably fly into Frankfurt, I think.
Okay. Germany's great. Actually, it's a nice place to go.
It's beautiful, yeah.
It's really lovely. Nice. And it's not like there's not a lot of, it's not very touristy, but it's just nice to hang out there and drive around and do things.
Yeah, it's really, really cool, yeah.
I want to ask you one quick question that's coming up, and I'm going to ask you another one. If somebody, obviously you have a skill set which is very well suited to your job, and I know you love what you do. If someone was trying to find someone similar to you and they're going out there and looking, where would they be looking? Would they be trying to recruit out of some of these providers, or where would they find them?
That would be the best place to find them. Someone who'd been working, on the back end of the software. If you could get someone who'd been doing that, it'd be amazing. So a lot of the people that work in those jobs are from the industry. They have to be, because they have to understand how the industry works. So a lot of them are paraplanners so that would probably be the best place to go and find someone. So
go out there, go on to Google, make a search for all of the third-party X-Plan providers and maybe even the software providers, and just go through and do a job search. Anyone who's worked for this person, and that's probably the best way to go about it. Right?
Yeah, that'd be a good idea. Yeah.
So before, this has been so good. Before I summarize, what do you like? Let's just bring it back around. What are the three biggest things you think you need to get right to whether it comes to software? Champions needs to be one of them.
Team communication is the other one. Training courses, researching the functionality. You've got to have a dedicated time in your role as well to do that. And that's really important. I think people want to have the software, but they're not allowing time in someone's day to research it or build it. So you've got to have dedicated time in your week, or in the Champions week, to research the software and to spend time, because it can take a long time. It can be really consuming part of your role when you start going down this rabbit hole of software and technology and functionality. And so you want to make sure you've got the time available to do that as well.
That's awesome. I'm just gonna I've learnt a lot from this today, and I think some of the biggest things I took was really outlining the importance of that champion and who they should be. I think the point about semi-automation, don't aim for automation, particularly with client communications, is really, really key. I love the point about, the fact that as a team, you're going analog before you jump into the digital, which is really, really key. Another thing which you really said, which I think is vital, which is when you're looking at a process, if you've got 21 steps, take any tasks that are done together, group them and turn them into checklists. In other words, your goal is to minimize the number of steps in a process, as well as the stuff you've done with the audio file loading. It's just absolutely incredible. Guys, can you do me a favor? Pop in the chat box so I can give a bit of feedback. What's the thing you've most enjoyed? What's the thing that you're going to take away from it? What's the thing that's been most useful for you today? I'm going to ask you, what are you most excited about 2022, Debbie? Apart from overseas travel.
Are we allowed to start overseas travel from Monday? Maybe I can book something next week.
I think we're waiting on ScoMo to kind of go, yep, you're allowed out of the fortress, but
I don't know, just life. Yeah, we're very lucky where we live on the Sunshine Coast, so we've got it pretty good up here at the moment.
Yeah, you've had I wouldn't say a smooth ride, but you've, compared to sort of everybody else in lockdown, you've been out of it for a while, so it's good.
Yeah, we have had it pretty easy up here. We've had some uncomfortable conversations with some, staff members from New South Wales or whatever, where they've come up and they said something. We've gone, we're back in COVID, and they'll go, it's not, COVID's still around, don't you?
Well, you know what? We signed up for this holiday farm. My daughter Hermione, she's horse and crazy, and we haven't been able to get there. So we're just chomping at the bit, literally, no pun intended, to get out there. What is it? Sean says the takeaway is that everybody needs a Debbie. I think William said he's made the realization that if he isn't the one to do the complexity, maybe X-Plan's not the solution for him, or maybe more specifically, maybe he needs a simpler platform. What else we got? Yanita said having a champion seems very obvious. That's something I've really taken from it, and that's kind of one of the things that when we were talking about, I was like, that's really the key to it. Someone who owns it. Chloe says a quote about not building a process for technology. In other words, building the process and put it in. That's good. Julia says confirmation that we need a dedicated person, dedicated time to build the strategy, implement and maintain. Yep. The workflow process from William, having a clear picture before deciding on software and coding in processes. And Steve says a room full of post-it notes. I was trying not to slip backward to paper, but we'll engage more of the team. General rule of thumb, go analog before you go digital. And my view on that is because if you're trying to create something, you need, that's why I use this, you need as little barrier between you and the idea getting out. The moment you use technology, suddenly you've gone from getting the idea out to working out, oh, how do I make this work, the formatting and all the rest of that, and it will just kill your creative process. So although everything paperless, go analog before you go digital, or at least digilog. I don't know what we call this. This has been incredible. One more thing. If you wanted people to do one thing when they leave this room, or if people want to know more about what you do or they want to connect, what's the best way to do it?
To connect would be on LinkedIn. So I'm on there if anyone wants to connect. I'm happy to share, any ideas or talk further about anything that we've talked about today. If you want to know anything, just shout out. And
anything in particular you'd like people to do apart from find your paraplanner?
Yeah, recommend some paraplanners. Start voice to text. If you don't have it, you're crazy. Yeah. I just can't believe how much time we've wasted, writing directly into our computer.
What does it say? The average person speaks at 200 words a minute, types at 40. You do the sums.
Yeah, exactly.
Debbie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And hope you've got a great weekend ahead of you. And to everybody else, you too. It looks pretty storm-free at the moment, so hopefully it stays that way. But otherwise, thanks very much. I'll see you guys later.
Thank you so much.
So there you have it, Debbie French, and I hope you took a lot from that. I know being part of that and having the opportunity to have that conversation at one of our masterclasses was really beneficial because I think it opened my eyes to a little bit more information on what it takes to master technology. But I know a lot of people at the session left with real insight into how to make it work, or alternatively, how far they wanted to go with technology. Of course, a quick reminder that if you want to come along and be part of one of our masterclasses, I actually run them as live webinars. So you get the opportunity to come along, be part of it, hear it firsthand, and most importantly, ask some questions along the way so you can get the answers. So if you want to find out more about what's coming up, what's on our schedule, head to our website, ourdare.com.au. Check out the upcoming events, and the latest masterclasses that are coming up should be in there. Otherwise, as always, if you have a speaker that you think you'd like to put forward with or without their permission, or alternatively, maybe you have a story you'd love to tell, please get in contact. Drop me an email at Stuart, Stewart, at ourdare.com.au, and I'd love to have a chat with you. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and I'll see you soon.